I'd like to welcome everyone to Visualizing People Networks. Everything is connected. It's time to see the links now. My name is Shelley Hayduck, and I'm co-hosting today with Matt Caton, our Director of Customer Solutions.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.
Today's session is all about visualizing people and the expertise and inspiration they can bring to your brain. Often when we're thinking about knowledge management or visualization, we're thinking about heavy data sets. Can I drag and drop and visualize a folder? I want to get all my documents, all my web pages. And of course, you can do just that. But there's a very powerful application that a lot of our customers are working on. It has to do with expertise location. It has to do with corporate VIP mappings, and then it has to do with some creative brains as well. So what we're going to cover today is specifically all about visualizing people networks. And a network, as the name suggests, isn't necessarily linear. And that's why technologies like TheBrain that offer a ability to create many-to-many relationships is simply ideal for representing people. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on some basic people mapping examples, and then Matt's going to come in with his examples and a little bit more on adding contacts and data integration as well. So I thought I'd start off this particular webinar. I had a bunch of brains from investors to Game of Thrones with science heroes. And again, I mentioned the word expertise, location, expertise mapping. This is something that is done quite a bit in large organizations. So I'm just going to use this example where you can actually go ahead and map out key domains of knowledge and their interest and make sure people are connected to those domains. And you can just start typing in a search. So let's say I want to go ahead and find, I know there's a guy named Alfred. I don't even know how to spell his name. I'm just going to go ahead and type in Alf. Okay, so I'm using my search to start, which is a little bit different because obviously I can start browsing around. But in this case, I know the person's name. So I just type in that, oh, and that's right. My memory isn't great. That's why I have my digital memory. Here I am with Alfred. It's Alfred Summer that I want. So I'm just going to click. And what's great about TheBrain is when I click on an item in search, or when your brain's all mapped out, you get all related connections. So I've got an image attached of who this person is, and then I've got notes on what Alfred's done. And of course, I want to give credit where credit's due. This is actually a mapping of scienceheroes.com. A lot of the content is from that website. And it's actually a great example of how TheBrain can provide additional value and inherent value and sort of your own customized view of a third-party data source. So I can see what his key insights are. In fact, I can click on that link, and the page is going to load below. In this case, I'm going to change my view here and make my brain full screen so everyone can see that he discovered that providing vitamin A, something as simple as vitamin A, can save children's life. Amazing fellow, right? So here we are in Alfred's world. But the other thing that's great about this is I can see other relationships. I was working on a paper on vitamin supplements. So I have that link to this particular expertise and all my research on that. And that's under a section in this brain called food innovation, which has all kinds of other things. So it's really great in that you can take this person who you may not remember, put them in your brain, and even if you just know the first letter of their name or what particular interest or function they have, you can always find them. So you won't have to remember all your names. This is particularly powerful for contacts. I do manage and own some property. I do this with realtors. I do this with previous tenants when a lease comes up, or people who have wanted to get into some of our buildings and spaces. When the space becomes available, I'll just pop in, their names, and they'll all appear. The other thing that's nice is you have the wonderful notes section here. So let me just go back to Alfred. There he is in my past thought list. So if I want to add any notes, because this guy is an inspiration to science. I can go ahead and type in that note, and I've got all my thinking on what Alfred is doing. And of course, I can come in here and create new connections to further customize my view. So I've got them under food innovation and science heroes. If I want to create a new section on inspirational research, for instance, which all this stuff is, I can just go ahead and add my link. And now I can go ahead and also connect Alfred. I can do that in a couple ways. I can drag to where he is in the past thought list, to his insights, or I can release my mouse button and just start typing in, again, just the first couple letters, and I'm going to grab him. And notice that even though he's in as Summer Alfred, not Alfred Summer, I'll still find him, and that'll appear there, which is really nice. So I've just made my connection here. And, I can continue to build an area on inspirational research. You can also pin people that you work with as well. So here's a section on James Jude, who discovers how to do CPR, another amazing discovery, right? And so that's something that I might also want to link back under my inspirational. So what I'm doing now is I just want to show you how interesting it is to find, but then once I find that person, that expertise, how I can link and recontextualize them and put them in the context of my knowledge. So here we go. So there are many ways to look at people in your brain, and there are many ways to map out people. This particular example is specifically dedicated to their research and the people. People can be nested in a general brain as well, and I'll show you that. But before I do, I just want to talk a little bit about architecture of brain and how people relate. So this particular brain, I chose to actually start off with several key topics: disease and drug treatments. So if I want to browse expertise this way, I can go in and look at that, see what's anything's interesting as far as certain drugs, certain diseases. I also have stuff on regional health concerns, science for children, and then stuff on even vaccines, all kinds of things, and medical techniques. So if I was interested in a certain surgical procedure, of course, I can go ahead and find out, who the people are that are great for that. And in fact, we do have a number of people in medical research as well. IT management, this works wonderful to connect people to their relevant projects. And we can go ahead and change the view as well. So if I want to go back to the top of my brain and go into some different views, first of all, I can go ahead and show another generation here. So I can see stuff that's a little bit further down here. And I'll just go back to drug treatment here, because that way you can kind of see different people who are responsible for these interesting innovations. And then I can also change this view just by going to outline view or our new mind map view. I'm just going to start off with outline view for now, so you can kind of get a sense. But I can go ahead and basically collapse or expand any area in my brain and any individual to see kind of what they cover. And of course, you can see that I still have my content area up here. So I can read about, an amazing person. The other thing you'll notice is I like to add images to the people that I see. So there's this wonderful picture of Robert Koch, and copy this image. Well, I'm going to do it another way in the brain. So I'll just go ahead and launch it here and copy this image. There we go. And then I can come to the actual thought and paste that image as a thought icon. And that looks really great. That can be attached, or if I want to go down and actually add it as a thought icon, I can go ahead and do that. And let me say paste icon right here. And this is how you get the wonderful zoomable icon next to the person with a nice picture as well. And then if I want to come back here and open up this brain further, I can explore this way to give me more of a linear view of what's being done. So this is just one example. What I want to now do is talk about your people network and how you can use the brain to help you with maybe your business research, your friends, your family. So this is an idea, just a basic mapping that gives you some ideas of how you can start organizing team and people that you might work with in your company. So I have a thought in this brain called my team, and each one of these thoughts represents a type of person in my organization. So I have coworkers, I have directors, and then these are actual thought types that I've actually just put in this area so people can see the type of thought. So I'll take a step back, and you saw how I've mapped people in a brain. And for instance, let's go ahead and click on Matt Caton, who is in this very basic brain. And Matt is part of my team. He is also a buddy of mine. So I've got him under both categories, but you'll also see Matt has a icon and a color. So in this brain, rather than adding a picture of a person, I have a typology of people that if I have, thousands of people, it'll work really well. So he's a director. He's actually director of customer solutions. So I have that thought type on him. And of course, I can go in and set a new type if I want to change him to visionary or project leader, executive. He's also an executive, so I'll make that change. So the executive, and of course, I can show you all my different thought types here in this box as well. Each one has a different color to represent their role in our company. And so you can set up basically think of it as a glossary of types of people and then apply these attributes as thought types. And you can have one thought type per person, but then you can also set up tags, and tags offer additional value. So Matt is, for instance, he is an HTML programmer. So if I want to add Matt and tag him, I can do it by dragging a link there. And I can also just click on Matt, and you can see the tags there, and just click on that particular thought and go into my tags area. And you can see he is tagged as HTML. And I can also tag that he is a writer and a graphic designer. And you can see, so I'm just going to go ahead and say that he's got 3 tags by his name. And this can be pretty powerful as well for data aggregation. So let's say, the brain is bigger, and I'm just thinking about my web design project, which he's already linked. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to unlink him. And let's say I'm just working with Brigitte, and we're a huge company. I don't even know who Matt is. Well, that's very easy. I can actually just go to my tags then, and let's do that, and say I'm looking for an HTML programmer or graphic designer. So I'm going to click on HTML programmer, and whoa, hey, and Matt's actually got some competition. Maybe I won't even use Matt. I was thinking about Matt, but see, I see that Brad Brown, who is a new hire. Maybe I want to connect him, or I can, decide, well, I want to go ahead and just drag Matt. I see his tag, and of course I can click on these tags. Let me just go and add Matt to my web design project, and then I've got a connection. So now I'm working on my new web design project with Matt and Brigitte as well. So that's just an example. This is a pretty simple brain, but it has some nice thought types for people. In the My Brain example on the Brain Apps page, a lot of these thought types are there. So if you don't want to build your own people thought types, happy to send this brain that's got some built-in ones. But they're very easy to create as well. And we can cover that a little later in the session. So you also want to have family in your brain. So kids, your spouse, your siblings, your parents, all that can go into your brain. And it's so great because, for instance, for your kids, the schools you're thinking of sending them to, the projects that you're working on with the people, the courses that you're enrolling them, that can become a huge, big knowledge base in and of itself. And it's funny because I was talking to a project manager the other day, and she has all these great mappings for her work, but she never thought of using the brain just for her kids and family. And then, I showed her a few things that I was doing, and she was just amazed. So this is more of a personal application, but people are it's personal. So it's fabulous, this particular area, and we can show you a few examples of that. But this is just to plant some seeds as to what type of people networks you want to get into your brain. And then, of course, there's a section here on partners, so you can add people. And you can see that I'm actually linking to Twitter feeds as well. So this is under the mind mapping section, and I've actually got this. This is my fellow mind mapper in Poland, where I've got his Twitter feed located. And with Matt, let me just go back and grab Matt. Let's do go to Matt. You can see I've actually got Matt's Facebook page as well as his Twitter feed as well. This could be, and there's many ways to add content for people. It can be all displayed as one attachment on their name. In this case, I kind of chose to have Matt's Facebook page separate because I really like TheBrain's auto preview. So of course I can adjust this, and let me just change the size of the font here so you can see, you know, kind of what this looks like. And then Matt's Twitter feed as well. And there were some interesting articles that he tweeted out. So I added that into my brain. So it's very easy to add connections simply by drag and drop, whether it's a web page, and you can add it onto the thought or it can go below. Now, what I want to do is I want to go to a larger brain that has people nestled within a larger corporate structure. So this is my brain, and I'm in the section on staff and teams. So I'm just going to go to the home area so you can see this brain. Now, this brain has everything from personal to worldview to my business. So let's talk about how people, you can connect people and business. And there are many ways to do this, but I do have an architecture that I like for people mapping. So I like to start off with the company name. Under the company, I will put the relevant departments. And then I will link people off as jumps. And what a jump is it's the side connection here. It's the lateral connection. So just to take a step back, because I'm sure we have a few new users, and we love the new and the experienced users on the call today. Pieces of information in the brain are what you call a thought. And a thought can represent any type of digital information. Anything below my active thought is a child thought. So sort of like your file folder hierarchy, a subcategory of information. Now, to the left of your brain, I have siblings. So thoughts that share a common parent. So clicking on a thought is going to trigger all related pieces of information. So in this case, I've clicked on marketing. Now, I'm actually going to go ahead and shut off my distant thoughts. Now that you see the power of lots of information, I want to make this a little cleaner for you, just so we can understand basics of thought relationships and how these relationships can be used to map out a people hierarchy and beyond. So I've just clicked on business. I've gone into the marketing department. You'll notice under marketing, I've got all the domains from public relations to marketing technologies to an expansion we're working on in Asian. And then I've got other departments, of course, engineering, client management, business development, sales, that's all siblings. Now to the left, the jump thoughts, I've got cool marketing ideas because that's not really, now a child, it could be, but in this case, I like to have it as sort of the tangential information jump. Now, I want to say up front, because before everyone starts reading, well, you know, marketing ideas can go below, and Catherine, if she's the manager of marketing, you could put her above, and that's absolutely true. So the brain can be as unique as you are. In this case, I like the idea of an interlocking hierarchy, is what we call it, of the departments, and then the people map, and then the associations come through the jumps, but they could come anywhere. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So in marketing, I've got Catherine connected. If I go to engineering, I can see who our VP of engineering is. In this case, it's an open position. If I go to sales, I can see that Terry Mason, oh, and actually I moved him just to show an example, is in charge of sales. And now this is an example of, we were talking about the arbitrary nature of some relationships. Now, in this particular example, I have the people attached as jumps to the department. But I know a lot of people, if you have one person that sort of owns or runs the department, I mean, absolutely, I can drag this thought around, and you'll notice it's changing gates to change the relationship. If I wanted to put Jim Johnson below as just under business development because he's working for the business development team, that might make sense to you. There he goes. Because I like to have my people separate, I have him as a jump. I've seen some nice mappings, and in fact, I can show you actually in my uh, One World Social Networking example. I do put investors over top of companies in this way as a parent thought to the company or department. So again, it's going to really depend on what your preference is for display. So you can decide, and we're going to show you a variety of examples where that makes sense. But it's very easy to change. And I think, as James Burke would say, he's a brain user, the famous author in PBS miniseries. It's not where the connection goes; it's that the connection is made that's most important. So that's something you can think about as well. So anyway, that's sort of how I'd add a person. But now what I want to talk about is the hierarchy of these people and how they come together. So here, what you can see is Jim is in charge of business development. He's got Lisa, who's the manager, as well as Nick Taylor under him. And you can see the thought types coming into play. So managers are appearing green, executive, red, and then we've got Barbara Powers. So these are all the people that report to Barbara. So I could have just come in through staff and teams or my business. And of course, the top of my business, I have Barbara, the CEO, connected. And then as child thoughts, the people who report to her appear under. So that's one way to show that. And let me go into Terry's area. So now the other thing you can do is if you want to further subcategorize people, I've got all his account managers under here and his business development managers. Now, if I want to change these relationships, that's very easy to do. So let's say I decide somebody gets a promotion. Molly is actually now working with Terry Mason. I can move Molly up here a little closer. So maybe I want to put Molly as a jump rather than under Terry. Or maybe Molly now reports directly to Barbara Powers. So let me just go to Barbara Powers, and I'm just going to go ahead and make a connection now to Molly. So as people change in your company, you can change things, and I can, of course, unlink and change the link here from Terry, or leave that the same. That's entirely up to you. And of course, I can also change her thought type too. So if I want to come in here, and she's a manager now, but if I want to go and make her an executive, let me just change that as well. Now she's appearing in red, and you can see all her other connections. And if I want to go ahead and adjust that Terry Mason link, I can go ahead and change that too. In this case, I do decide she's not reporting to him, even though she was. So I'm going to unlink that as well. And I've just changed that relationship. And similarly, maybe somebody, this VP of Finance position, for whatever reason, it's going to be managed by Terry. So I'm going to move that under Terry and change that. And Hank Jones as well as a freelancer, but he's also going to be managed by Terry. So that's one way to change things. And the other thing that you can do is, let's say business development managers really belong under marketing. We're going to sunset this category. I'm just going to control click to grab all these business managers. And I'm going to go ahead and go back to, let's go activate the marketing thought. So let's go to marketing. And marketing is run by Catherine. So these people are actually going to go under Catherine now, not Terry. So now what I'm going to do is right-click on my selection. I'm going to link these as children of Catherine. So they're linked. And then I'm going to go back to Terry, who's VP of Sales, that they were under, or they are actually under business development managers, rather. And I want to unlink them from that, because we're now changing their title. So I'm going to unlink selection. And I'm actually just going to close this area because we're considering them marketing managers. So I'm going to forget this thought altogether. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So I wanted to show you this. You can see how easy it is to change people, because A lot of people will move around in a company. And in fact, if you're playing with how to set up teams or how to assign people to different projects, this is one way to do it. In fact, we have companies growing by merger or acquisition where when they're looking at all the skills in the organization, you can create a brain map to see which people are redundant in a certain team, which people need to be moved. And now you can see Catherine, it started off with Terry having that big team, but now I'm just going to close the selection box here. It's actually Catherine that's got, a bunch of people working. And now all these people, I'm going to control click on them. They're not typed, are they? They're business development managers that weren't typed. So I'm actually going to add these guys in, and I can do a lot of different neat things in the selection box. I'm going to go ahead and select a thought type for them all. They're all going to be actual executives under Catherine. So now Catherine has a nice set of executives and managers as part of her team. So that's really how sort of the basics of people mapping. We're coming up on the half-hour mark. I can't believe how much there was to cover. So there are other examples that I can circle back to. But Matt, I should check in with you on Q&A. I think I'm going to pass presenter over to you now, so you can talk a little bit more about your examples and adding information to people.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And as Shelley has demonstrated, the brain is really great for bringing those people into your brain, all those people that you know and people that you work with, so you can map out what their projects are, what their responsibilities are within your business brain that you're putting together, family members into your brain, so you can keep track of birthdays, Twitter feeds, LinkedIn links, whatever the case may be. But this sort of starts lending itself to what else can we do with people in the brain? And Bob actually presented the question earlier, what about genealogy? What about mapping out a family tree? So that's precisely what I want to share with you now. And of course, I could share with you my family tree, which I do have mapped out in the brain. But to be honest with you, my grandpa William and my great-grandpa Fred, both from Iowa, it's just not quite as exciting as the Tudor dynasty. So this is a brain that we collaborate on here in the office, whether we're watching the Tudors or The Crown on Netflix. Everyone has a little bit of interest, and what a fascinating subject and great example. I would call it the diamond example of a genealogy brain, of a family tree being visualized. Not only do we have the actual people, but we've got so much data and information and resources, pictures, photographs, paintings that are out there to help on this topic. And this is a brain that you can visit online. At the end of the demo today, you'll all receive a thank you email with links out to several of the brains that we're demoing today. This will be one of them. So this started out as the Tudor brain, the House of Tudor. We mapped out all of the Tudors. Every ruler of the United Kingdom that was in the House of Tudor is in this brain. And quite often we expand beyond that. So you can see Henry VII is sort of the father of the House of Tudor. He's actually the last king that won the throne of England on the battlefield. So he's not directly related to who he defeated, Richard III, but we do have some other information on, I think Richard was in the House of York and so forth, but now we get into the House of Tudor. And let's take a look at this. This is only people being mapped out in this brain. So obviously, I don't work with these people. These people are just historic figures, and we can really map out and learn more on this particular topic. And hopefully this gives you some ideas on how you can map out your own family tree or the lineage of George Washington or another historical figure that you're interested in. But here, quite simply, we've got Henry VII as the current active thought. Notice below that we have these links called issue. So obviously an issue is your child. So Henry was married to Elizabeth of York, and the links provide additional information here. Very, very important information. So that's what I want to focus on just for a minute, about how you can understand further context about what you're looking at by the link types within the brain, not just the reading through all the content that I have in the notes and the web attachments, but just visualizing the links themselves. So you'll notice as I click through, I'll click on Henry VIII. Boy, we've got a lot of information about him in the notes, etc. I'm going to minimize the notes for now and just focus on the structure of the plex. So once again, I'm using the same features that Shelley has demonstrated. I've got some great zoomable icons so I can get that visual of who Henry VIII was. And I can see his 3 children. We even mapped out, there's great information out there on the web about his favorite pets. And I recall saying in the past when we were putting this brain together collectively at TheBrain that poor Henry VIII was unlucky in love. And Shelley rightfully pointed out that maybe it was his wives that were unlucky in love. And this is really dramatic and brings that home when you see.
It was definitely his wife.
I'll mouse over Anne Boleyn, and you can see they were married. The link tells me they were married from 1533 to her execution in 1536, which Henry had a lot to do with. And then Anne, so forth. Here's Jane Seymour, 1536 to 1537. And Catherine Parr, 1543 to 1547. So all the different wives and who their children were down below, some that he did not have children with, some that he did. But we can follow this on down the line, Elizabeth I of England, and then into James V of Scotland and first of England. Now notice, this is very, very interesting. Coming off of Henry VIII's daughter that he had with Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth I of England, she was in the House of Tudor and she was on the throne. I've got her dates there. Her successor was James V of Scotland. Not directly related. This was not Elizabeth of of England. As you can see here in the brain, she was not married. She did not have children. Her successor was a distant nephew, and I can follow this back up to see that he is the son of Mary, Queen of Scots, and Mary, Queen of Scots is the daughter of James of Scotland, and that comes up to Margaret Tudor. And as you can see, Margaret Tudor was the sibling, the sister of Henry VIII. So a distant nephew then had to be found and took the throne because the lineage below Henry VIII slowly died off, to be quite specific. So let's go ahead now and talk about how I set these link types up. I'm going to click down again through Elizabeth and James the Sixth of Scotland. So I'm going to click on the link between these two thoughts. Now let me bring my notes back as well. Notice that when I click on a link here, if I'm just on James, I haven't clicked on anything. There's James the Sixth. I've got his notes. I've got a Wikipedia link over on the right. But when I click on the link between two thoughts, you can add context to the links, whether you're just naming the individual link or even adding file attachments and notes. Sometimes the most important part of an area of your brain is the relationship between two thoughts, not the actual thought themselves. So in this case, I just want to define that James the Sixth is the successor that came right after Elizabeth I. His parents are distant relatives. And so I've clicked on the link, and I'll click again to open up the link properties. If I double click on an active thought, I'm opening up the thought properties. I believe Shelley demonstrated that. That's where you can change a thought type, maybe even add an icon or change the color code of a thought. You can do the same with a link. So I've double clicked on the link between Elizabeth and James, and I could just type out successor and give that a color code, but there's a couple of instances throughout this brain. Now that this brain is growing into the House of York and the House of Windsor at the bottom, we're finding that not always the person taking the throne, lately it has been, but there's areas in history where the person that took the throne was not directly related. So they're simply called the successor. They're the next in line. So I want to set up a new link type since I'm going to be using that link over and over again. So I click on, currently this link is untyped, and here's the different types that I've set up. I'm going to select create a new link type, successor. And I'll click on that again to click on the little pencil to modify. A successor link will always have a particular color. I can set up a directional link. We'll get to those in just a minute. In this case, maybe I want a successor link to always be green. So green means go, it went in this direction. That was the successor. And I can, if I want, I'll click once again and go ahead and add a direction. I'm going to be talking about those directional links in just a bit. So after Elizabeth came James the Sixth. Let's jump right back up to the House of Tudor. Henry, once again, I mentioned earlier, he won the throne on the battlefield. He was the successor after Richard III, not directly related. So I'm going to double click on that link and change the link type to successor. And they even add a directional link. This is a toggle button. I can toggle back and forth. You may have seen Shelley was using this. I use this quite a bit. So you can have a direction of the link. This person is responsible for these projects, or these projects as a direct result has created these issues. And you want that arrow to appear so you can just kind of see the flow. It's not always just clicking down. Sometimes you're clicking back up or to the left or to the right. Again, I'll demonstrate some directional links in just a moment. But here we've simply added some greater context, and we can see Richard III, his successor, Henry the Fifth, or Henry the Sixth. And of course, I can click on that link once again and add those notes about Henry winning the throne on the battlefield, etc. I think that information is probably on Henry's thought. So regardless, now we've set up a couple of additional link types. The benefit is if I want to look, and I haven't mapped out the entire history of the throne from person number 1 to the current Queen Elizabeth, but nonetheless, within my brain, I can run a report. I can run a report for all thought types. I can run a report for all file attachments, thoughts that have web pages, thoughts that have Word documents, thoughts that have notes, etc. In this case, I'm just going to quickly show you the advantage of setting up these thought types and thought tags that Shelley set up. I can say, all right, show me all thoughts by type. In this case, I'm looking for a link type. So under types, I've got all of my thought types, but I also have link types. Show me all thoughts that I have some type of connection via the successor link type. So I just check that box. And since I just created this link type, there's only 4 so far, but these 4 people have a link regardless of where it is, jump, parent, child, but they have the link type of successor. So I can go to Richard III, and yes, his successor was Henry VI, etc., and find that information in my historical brain in the House of Tudors that I'm creating. One more thing to share in this brain before I take things in a completely different direction with adding people into our visual networks within the brain. I'm going to go ahead and click down. Now, this can take some time. We've spent some time in this brain. It's a lot of fun to navigate through. But you can see there's some blank areas. There's areas where we're still filling in content. Charles I, his son James II, and the daughter. I'm going to click through very quickly. I'm not sure if the brain is, or if the GoToMeeting is even keeping up. But eventually, after about 10 clicks, we come to Queen Victoria. Now we're getting into sort of an area of interest that some people may be a little bit more familiar with. I've clicked down her grandchild, George V, is the grandfather of the Queen of England, I believe, if I'm right. And yes, there you can see George V. His son, Edward, abdicated the throne and gave the throne. If you're watching the Crown on Netflix, you'll be familiar with this. There's George VI, his daughter, Queen Elizabeth, her sister, Princess Margaret, and her husband and their children. Again, all mapped out here in the brain. So really quickly, I'm going to go back to George V and once again minimize my content and share one more fantastic feature of adding people into the brain, and that's getting the big picture. Whether you're doing this in your business environment, your family tree, or just a historical reference brain, notice I can go into my brain, and I'm going in full real estate, making my brain as large as possible on the screen. And I'm going to jump into another view called Mind Map View. Now, Mind Map View allows us to sit back and get the bigger picture, visualizing more distant relationships within the brain. So not only can I see George V had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 children, but let me minimize my font size just a little bit so we can still see it on the screen, but I can hover over a thought. I'll hover over Charles, Prince of Wales, and click on the plus sign. Now I can see his children, as maybe you're familiar with. Prince William now has 3 kids, so I click and expand. So I can meticulously decide, what do I want to view on the screen? I can hover over a thought and expand, or hover over a thought and there's a little minus sign, the collapse button. It's not deleting the thought, you're just removing those attached thoughts from the view. And there's even a plus and minus right up here at the top of the screen. So if I click on plus, I'm now expanding in mass, all thoughts, an additional generation. And you can see how quickly we start getting the big picture. I've expanded several generations out. I can even go further. Some of these have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, etc. So I can really decide what I want to see on the screen. And in some cases, this question came up in the web meeting, drawing connections. If for some reason you've got a very distant cousin that is maybe forming a business partnership with another. I don't think there would be a marriage in this case, but maybe Samuel and Lady Rose Gilman are deciding to start a business together called royallineage.com. So I can make a link between these two very distant thoughts. What is the relationship? I'll click on the link and type in business partners. So 2 thoughts that would typically be 5, maybe 10 clicks away from one another. Now I've just noticed, wait a minute, I know a relationship between these 2 thoughts. Again, whether it's people or projects or products that you're working on, it's a great way to get sort of the big picture on your information. Now, since this is a real brain that we sync, I want everything to be as honest and valid in this brain as possible. So I'm going to right click on this link that I just created and unlink. I do not think, as far as I'm aware, Lady Rose and Samuel David Benedict Chetto are forming any business relationships with one another. So again, a really, really fun brain, a great example of genealogy within a brain, and some different options that you can use and features of the application in your own genealogy brain. Let's take a little bit of a jump now, and we're going from speaking about real people that we're working with, family members, historic figures. And I'm going to jump now into my Shakespeare brain. Now, this is another interest and passion of mine, mapping out Shakespeare. This particular brain, once again, you'll get a link to. It contains the entire works of Shakespeare. But what I really like about this brain is not only do I have all of his literature, so every comedy play that he wrote, I've got information about the play, when he wrote it. I can click on any one of these. All's Well That Ends Well was written around the era of 1603, which historians call his, the King's Men, a group that he was writing for and doing plays for the kings of England at the time. So I've got some better understanding of when he wrote it, why he wrote it, links and studies of, did he write it together? Was it collaborative with other writers, etc. But I also have character studies in this particular brain. And so this is a really fun area that I wanted to share with you. I'm just going to jump into a play that maybe you're familiar with, Midsummer Night's Dream. It's got a very large cast, and there's a lot of very interesting relationships within this cast. So right away, you may notice Hippolyta. Hippolyta is in love with Theseus, Theseus being the founder of Athens. And so for their marriage, they're putting on a play, and he hires the Philostrate to gather local townsmen to perform this particular play. They typically call these the mechanicals, I believe, within the play. So it's got character studies on all of these wonderful, really rich characters that Shakespeare used for this play. And this is where I find it very interesting. Aegeus is a father of a young, beautiful daughter, Hermia. And he goes to the king and says, hey, I want Hermia to marry this man, Demetrius. But as you can see from my links, Hermia loves Lysander. So that's a bit of an issue. Lysander, however, as you can see, loves Helena. And Helena loves Demetrius. So the star-crossed lovers in this particular story is mapped out here with a bit of understanding. Everything works out in the end and the relationships become a little bit different, but this is sort of what we start with and what makes for really great theater. So I'm going to share with you a couple of other features that you can utilize for people. And again, utilizing those links to identify relationships. I'm going to jump into, this particular play, there are mythical characters as well. So Oberon and Titania are two sort of gods and goddesses of the forest, and Titania actually hires Puck to go through, and not hires him, but requests that he goes and cast some spells, and he's very mischievous, and he casts some spells within the forest as well. So he certainly casts a spell on Lysander. So I'm just going to type in the existing thought name, and there you can see is Lysander, my existing thought, my existing character for Lysander. So I double click and link Puck to Lysander. Now, what is his relationship? He simply casts a spell. So I'm going to, once again, double click on that link. So he casts a spell. Now I can make that a thought type if I'm going to use it over and over again. Puck also casts a spell on, I believe his name, not Oberon, but Bottom the Weaver, or Nick Bottom. There he is. And if you're familiar with some of the pictures of A Midsummer Night's Dream, sometimes you see a person with a donkey's head, and that's because Puck has cast a spell to play a trick back on Titania and make the two of them fall in love, and he casts a spell and gives him the head of a donkey. So not only making people fall in love with one another, but really having some fun and changing them into a donkey. Everything is all fixed in the end, and it's all wonderful. But this, once again, will help me better understand what characters affect other characters and in what way. So another great example, I think, of ways you can utilize people, not just people you know, but interesting characters or books, or for writing, mapping out relationships between people that you have, whether they're fictitious people or real people. And speaking of fictitious people, we've got one more really fun example. And Shelley, I think I might have to hand it over to you for this, or maybe you can steer me through this particular brain. We have our Game of Thrones brain. Now, I'll tell you right away, spoiler alert.
Matt. I can take the ball. It was funny because I thought, oh, you know what, I forgot. I know we got to show that one. But I was on the air and I thought, gosh, I want to get, by the way, love the Tudor example. And people, I hope your family tree looks nothing like theirs.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me put my webcam. Yes, I'll show the Game of Thrones. But before I switch to me, there's a question coming in from David regarding what you were showing about, could you show this as a timeline that scrolls through the viewer? So we do have timeline view, but it's more for appointments. I've done timelines as child thoughts by periods. Like I had a music brain, I don't have it access, where I've gone from the 80s and put everything under that as child thoughts. So I don't know if you have anything to address David's question on like a timeline view.
Yes, I mean, you certainly can do that. Let's say, for example, I'll just go back to the Tudor dynasty, and I don't know, I'm going to jump down to Elizabeth II. So there you can see Elizabeth II, 1952 to present. So the timeline view, something that we really weren't planning on discussing today, but it is relevant in this scenario. So let's go ahead and open up the brain's timeline. So I'm going to click on this button. You can also click on View Timeline. I like to use the little button shortcuts. And the timeline, as you can see, is a scrolling calendar, a linear calendar of events. It's really great for setting up reminders, recurring events, meeting notes, and having the brain remind you about specific events. You can also synchronize your timeline with your Google Calendar. So you're then receiving email reminders about events that originated and were created in the brain. But if you want to view in the timeline of when, historically a particular person took office or created that, and created in penicillin or something in your science brain. In this case, Elizabeth, as you can see, took the crown in 1952. So I'm going to, there's many different ways to add new events. I could go and scroll through the brain and go to maybe jump to year view and then scroll to 1952. In this case, I'm going to click on the plus tab with Elizabeth as the active thought and create an event. And the event name is on the throne or Queen of England, I guess you would say. But the time was from, and I'll just manually type this in. If I knew the exact date, I'll just leave it in August 1952 to present. So that looks good. And also I can even, let me get my go-to meeting out of the way here.
Yeah, so it's really like an event on your calendar. And like we for people in my other brain, I will have obviously events on my timeline of my meetings, right? And of course in history, it's a little more interesting.
So there I've added the event, and if I zoom in, let's go to today. So if I zoom in and scroll over, I'm not seeing, let me see, let me go back. Oh, there she was, Elizabeth II. I think I got the dates wrong, so let me double click.
We don't have a calendar that goes back centuries and centuries ago, though. But, if we get a lot of historians and, there might be a way to tweak that. Eventually we have APIs, but that is cool. Like if you were to actually take the calendar and customize it to just a more like a linear timeline throughout history.
There you can see I've expanded the date. So we go from 1952, and if I scroll over, and boy, she's going to have, I think, probably the longest line of the entire calendar. But there I was able to successfully set that up. And then we can go to George, who was probably the 30s to 1952. Once again, we can set that up, create events. And we go from, what did they say, 1938?
And I just want to say, if you have any outstanding items that were due from 1952, you are far behind your deadlines, people. Get it together.
1952. And so we save that. And so there you can see is George's reign in the calendar. So really adds some...
actually, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, interesting. Yes, okay. Great question, David.
Great.
Okay. Well, yeah. Now we are officially in Q&A time. So what I'll do, I think we covered most of the questions, but I'm gonna move to the Game of Thrones brain. One more question coming in from Matthias: is there a possibility of filter the Plex so that we could only see certain thought types for people? For example, focus only on those links. And yes, that's the great thing about thought types and thought tags, because you can just click on that thought type or tag and only see the people of that type, only see the people that are tagged as such. So I'll let Matt go ahead and keep the ball there, and then we'll do a little end on the fun note with a little bit of the
Sure. So I'm just opening up my list of different thought types that I have in this particular brain. And sometimes I'm keeping track of who was the King of France, because the King of France married the Queen of England or what have you. And in some scenarios, people were both the King of England and France at the same time. That did happen in history, and that was Edward VI of England, was also the King of France and Ireland at the time. So again, that's the only one in the entire brain, so I can quickly visualize that. I can also go to this brain. I've got how many people were in the house of Trastamara, and that was Catherine of Aragon, who married Henry VIII. So yes, you can very easily identify and show just in the Plex only thoughts that have this tag or only thoughts that have this type. And you can run reports on those as well. So a couple of different ways to find and visualize that content once you start applying thought types and tags to the brain that you're creating.
All right, great. And now I guess I'll go ahead and grab presenter. I think we covered a lot of the questions, but feel free to, fire any questions back at me as we dive into Game of Thrones. There is a spoiler alert on this, brain. If you're not, even though the season is actually over and we haven't even had one this year. I don't know that I will. Well, I guess it's possible. So if those of you are like Netflixing it now, you could plug your ears. I'm not really going to go into major plot subtleties, but I guess there is a chance you could see something in the brain. So we've got the spoiler alert there. All right. So another brain that, again, if you're mapping out your family tree, I hope your family tree looks nothing like this one. But to that end, let's go ahead and go into the noble families. So again, what you'll see, and I loved Matt's wallpaper from the nice clean Shakespeare with the pen to the deeper Tudor. So again, and we've got the Game of Thrones, a family crest there. So don't forget to personalize with wallpaper and colors any of your brain. So here we've got noble families. This is also great, by the way, for writers exploring words. I know a science fiction writer, I'm not going to mention his name, but he actually maps out the families and characters as he's starting to write his novel. So that's just something else to think about. And you know what? It's just fun. Like, you can geek out with a show and map a show, with a buddy just for fun and talk about plot lines. So again, we can do anything from complex business mappings to, Game of Thrones. So here we are in Game of Thrones. I'm going to go into House of Tyrell because they're just so nasty. So it starts with, actually, sorry, I don't want to go to House of Tyrell. What am I talking about? I want to do the Lannisters. It's always, arguable. So let's talk about Tywin Lannister. So in this particular brain, you'll see, and there are many ways to do this. In fact, this was done by somebody else, and they decided to use the link types as Lannister. I don't know, you could do different link types, and married as a link type. So he was married to Joanna Lannister, and his children were Tyrion, Cersei, and Jaime Lannister. For those of you that know the show, and of course, I could link to where they, their location and so forth. But in this case, when I click on Cersei, you can see in the notes area, we have embedded images. And that's something you can do. This is a little bit different from the brain of science heroes that I showed you, where science heroes, we actually put the face of the person right here. In this brain, the pictures in the notes. So again, just different ways to slice and dice the information, whatever works for you. The idea behind this one was that we wanted the consistency of the family crest to appear next to the name. So if you want consistency, you can go for that. And my science hero, I actually wanted the people to pop. So Cersei, and this is where it gets interesting, she actually had some kids with her brother, Jaime. And one of the children was Joffrey, who became king because their father was shot with an arrow by Tyrion. So anyway, there's all that. And again, a fictitious company. So we've got Joffrey Baratheon, and that's linked to Cersei and her, the father that was supposed to be the father, but who the real father is. So again, in this case, the parent-child jump relationship is actually parent-child jump. So that's kind of just one example of the craziness of Game of Thrones. And for those of you that watch, you can kind of see it. I can just continue to browse. This takes me into the House of Baratheon, which then takes me back to noble families. And I have other areas. The other thing, we talked a little bit about filtered views. Because we've got thought types and tags, what I can do is go into tag, and I'm going to go ahead and grab anyone who is part of, let's say, the Night's Watch. Who wants to go ahead and stand on a very tall wall in very cold weather to keep out the living dead? If you do, you can join the Night's Watch. Raise your hand. So the Night's Watch is, of course, the area that keeps the people from the living dead. These are all people who pledged their loyalty to keeping the humans safe. So here's a section on just the Night's Watch, and I got there based on the tag as well, or the thought type of these particular people. So there's many ways to do this, and of course, I'm not going to go too much into it since we're on the hour. But another just fun example is Jon Snow. So how can we not talk about Game of Thrones without talking about the central protagonist, Jon Snow, who was part of the Night's Watch, but also is a son of, maybe this is where, if you haven't watched the show, I'm not going to say who he's a son of, because the paternity is a very interesting thing. So just don't look at the parents. But anyway, he's got many parents up there for a reason, because the season does reveal that he is of an offspring of other people. And then, of course, he has many different people that he's sort of been involved with, from Missandra all to Ygritte, which is actually played by his an actress that he ended up marrying in real life, so we could add some content there too. Daenerys, who is a Targaryen as well, and she's also competing for the throne. So we've got a picture of her, and that takes us back to the Targaryen family. Under House of Targaryen, you can see all the different ancestors, back to noble family, back to Game of Thrones. And I think, there's so much more. I'm happy to share this brain for those of you that are Game of Thrones fans. We're on the hour, and I just had to go through it because I know there were a few of you on Twitter and that had messaged that were somewhat excited about that. So, and that's basically that. And I don't know, Matt, if we have any other questions or comments or anything else we want to cover in the Q&A before we close the session here.
Sure. Just one last question that came in about viewing these brains. Obviously, we're going to send you links to the brains that we demoed today. Some of the brains that Shelley showed earlier is a template brain. So you'll be able to actually download that brain to use it as your sandbox, or to go in and change the names. Once you download it, you can actually go in and change the content of that brain. And there are many different brain examples on apps.thebrain.com. Subjects of different types of businesses are using the brain for different environments, and brains that you can actually download for sure.
Yeah, I just put on my screen thebrain.com/apps, and this particular Brain for Everything does have all the people types in it. So definitely grab this page, grab those types, but I'm also happy to send all of you the Your People Network brain that has just a smaller set of thought types there. If that's, if you don't want to create those, that's fine. And then there was one more final question that I did want to address that we didn't get to, was just how to get the content in. Somebody asked earlier in the session how this brain was created. Did I, index the site? And we talked a little bit about drag and drop. And so, yes, I dragged and dropped links from scienceheroes.com. So what I want to do, I just want to show you all just really quickly how easy it is to drag and drop a link, whether it be from Twitter or, whomever. So they have, the thing that's interesting is this site is all lists. It's all linear. So I wanted to create my brain that was a little bit more dynamic. So for instance, if I click on Bill, who had a vaccination strategy to end smallpox, I can simply take Bill and I can grab that URL and simply drag and drop it under Science Heroes. And actually, it's already attached. So I'm just going to go ahead and and that's the nice thing about the brain. It's never going to let you duplicate things. It's quite intelligent. So I can navigate to the existing attachment. In this case, I'm just going to add it in again so you can see. So here's Bill. And then I've got his web page that appears right here. And then from there, I can link Bill to vaccines just by typing in the first couple of them. And I won't get into linking because, we've already covered that. But it's all, it's all through drag and drop. I can just do another example here, Game of Thrones. I have the Game of Thrones HBO site up. And so in this case, instead of spoiler alert, maybe I just want to have drag and drop the Game of Thrones link right on Game of Thrones there. So now, rather than it saying spoiler alert in this brain, I've just made a change here. I actually have the link to HBO.com appearing there for content. So again, whether it's dragging and dropping a file or a web page, very easy to add that content. You can see how great, does this look, the website next to, a mapping of the families. And I think
And
that's
Shelley,
it.
one related question that just came in, can you have the brain search the web and find the content for you? So if you could really quickly just click on F4 on any thought, or click on search web to show that the brain can actually search through the web to find your content if you've already created the thought.
Let's go up to options. So one of the great things about the brain is in your options area, I thought you were trying to get me to do some kind of other search. I can go ahead and launch a web search from my active thoughts. So if I hit search, I can go ahead and get all the information on Game of Thrones. And then from there, if it's the Game of Thrones Facebook homepage, I can go ahead and add that in. Or if it's news, I can do that as well. There's all kinds of stuff here. So there's the making of Game of Thrones. I'll just go ahead and drag and drop that in. And just to get back to Matt's point, just so I'm clear. So let's say I want to do research on a particular character. Let's go back to Daenerys Targaryen. I can again go ahead and just hit F4 to bring up that search. Or what I can do is actually go up to options and hit search web. And then again, it's going to actually, the default is Google, but you can go ahead and add whatever your favorite search engine is. And I'm going to go and do a search for Daenerys Targaryen. So there's all kinds of information that's appearing on Daenerys. And there's a wiki, a Fire and Ice wiki, which is actually what the book, this wasn't just created by HBO. This is based on a book. So this is kind of cool. So what I can do is I can drag the write-up from the book of this character in under her name, and I got to that through the Brain's web search. There we go. All right. And then any other final questions, Matt?
I think that was the last question that rolled in. So glad we were able to demonstrate the web search.
Great. All right. Well, for those of you that want a more basic example of creating a brain from scratch, today we showed all pre-populated brains. Join us tomorrow, specifically Matt Caton, for the Brain 101. It's every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern time. And, that we're going to actually start from ground up. And, he can also take requests. If you want to start building a brand new Tudor Brain with him in the class, you can do that. It's also smaller class size. So if we missed any questions, we apologize, but we run out of time, and the size of these classes are a little larger. But sign up for the Brain 101, and that's on our homepage. And with that, I think any final words of wisdom, Matt, before we close our session today?
I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Again, you're going to get a follow-up email with links to some of the brains, whether it's online or a brain you can actually download. And if you have any further questions at any time, you can always reach us at support@thebrain.com. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Have a great day.